Friday, June 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. So what happens next? Clarence Thomas wants the Supreme Court to overturn rulings that legalized contraception and same-sex marriage. Griswold v. Connecticut allowed married couples to buy and use contraception. Lawrence v. Texas allowed same-sex intimacy, sodomy. And let's not pretend this is, that they're talking about sodomy within marriage. This is an anti-gay bill, right? They're trying to overrule the legalization of sodomy for gay men. Okay? And then, of course, there was Obergefell versus Hodges, which allowed same-sex marriage. The reasoning used in all three cases, as well as Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, was based on substantive due process, which allows courts to protect certain rights even if those rights are not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. The conservative court has a big problem with this. Clarence Thomas said, quote, "As I have previously explained, substantive due process is an oxymoron that lacks any basis in the Constitution." He later called it a legal fiction that is, quote unquote, particularly dangerous. He then went on to say, quote, "In future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, because any substantive due process decision is, quote unquote, demonstrably erroneous. We have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents," end quote. So here is the danger. The original Constitution didn't give basic human rights to anyone but straight, white, biological males. Not too long ago, Justice Alito also made reference to this when he argued against Roe v. Wade on the grounds that abortion is not a constitutional right. But this logic then attacks any amendment, meaning any and all rights given after the original Constitution was written. And that includes everything from gay marriage, the right to have intimate relations, aka sodomy, same-sex, relations, same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, and the right to use birth control, and even the right for women to vote. That's not in the Constitution either. And of course, every step of the way, when we warned of what would happen, the liars and manipulators shouted, "That won't happen." And yet every single thing they said would not happen to women has now happened. A few weeks ago, they again began patronizing us, claiming that we were hysterical when we said overturning Roe v. Wade would lead to other constitutional rights being taken. They said it would not affect gay marriage or the right to use contraception. Now, they are coming out and telling us that they plan to take away those rights, or at least they're looking into taking away those rights. They are liars, through and through, which is what one would expect from the false church, the worldly church, the Christo-fascists, who claim to follow Christ but act in accordance with the Antichrist instead. Jesus is not the father of lies, and they are liars. They can use his name in their tyranny all they want, but it's not of him. The one case Clarence Thomas did not mention was Loving versus Virginia, which struck down anti-miscegenation laws, meaning there were initially laws against interracial marriage. Okay, by striking down those laws, they gave American citizens the right to marry outside of their race. He's a black man married to a white woman, so he didn't mention this particular case among those he wants to overturn. And yet we all know what is coming. Eventually they will attempt to overturn this as well. And anyone who claims that they won't happen, that'll never happen, is a liar. Every step of the way, these Antichrist liars have claimed they won't do that. And every step of the way, they've done that. Whatever it is they're claiming that won't happen, it has happened. They say that, and then they mock and they degrade, and they try to make, they deem us hysterical and mentally ill when we claim something is going to happen and when we warn about these things. Why? Because they want to silence any opposition so that they can do it, get away with it, and by the time they do it, it's too late to stop it. Conniving, manipulative liars. Filthy. Okay. So first they said that their anti-quote-unquote abortion laws would not endanger the lives of women and girls, and that maternal health would always be put first. Now they have decided that a woman's life isn't any more valuable than the zygote inside of her, and that if she dies, and that if the zygote or fetus dies, so should she. Some Christians are now saying that if a woman, quote unquote, kills her baby, meaning the zygote or a clump of cells that was barely conceived a week ago, that doesn't have a brain, a central nervous system, a conscience, can't think, feel, or suffer, they call that baby killing. Even if leaving it inside of her will kill the woman, they say then she deserves to die too. But I wonder, if a man rapes a 10-year-old girl and she's forced to carry to term and deliver, or at least try to, and it kills her, should he die too then? Should he, if a woman's fate should be the same as the quote-unquote baby, should a man's fate be the same as the woman? If she dies, should he die? No, they would never do that, because this was never about value for life. It was never about value for life. They have also included the morning after pill in their anti-abortion laws. Even if given to a child rape victim, not to terminate pregnancy, but to prevent one. So let's say an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old was raped and she goes to the hospital that night. They can do a pregnancy test right there. She's not going to be pregnant that soon. They can show that she's not pregnant. So if they give her the pill right then, they're not going to terminate a pregnancy. They're going to prevent one. They would deny her even that to a child. And of course, I mean, they have included the removal of a zygote or fetus in a situation where the mother's life is at risk and she will die if it's not removed. They will have no mercy on her, even if she's a child. Apparently, not even death is enough of a risk to the mother's life to warrant treatment that would get in the way of natural reproduction, gestation, and birth. This is a death cult, okay? They demand sacrifice, life and death sacrifice from women and little girls, okay? They are sacrificed to this bloodthirsty, murderous God, okay? A clump of cells that was just conceived a week ago and doesn't have a brain, a central nervous system, can't think, feel, or suffer, there's going to be no suffering there if that's removed. But if an 11-year-old rape victim is forced to carry and bear her rapist offspring, her suffering is going to be so astronomical. She's the sacrifice to Satan, especially since or the Antichrist, or whatever, whatever monsters these false Christians are worshiping. And she's going to die believing that this is what God wants from her, because that's what these sick animals are telling her. Not even death is enough of a threat to her life. So then they said they would never force rape victims to carry and bear the rapist offspring. They lied, as they have now left no exceptions for rape or incest, even if the victim is an 11-year-old child. Initially, they said they would never force a child to bear her rapist offspring. And of course, even if some twisted animal can say that an 11-year-old girl somehow, some way brought it on herself, there were still laws that prevent statutory rape. Okay, for a 30-year-old man to rape an 11-year-old girl, it would still be considered statutory rape. But now they're also trying to get rid of age of consent in these Republican states. So then these children would not even be covered by statutory rape. They wouldn't even be protected with that. No, they will give the women. Let me see. I'm sorry. I'm reading off a script because I knew I was going to forget this. Okay. Yeah, so they said they wouldn't force a child to bear her rapist offspring, and they lied. They said they would also never criminalize miscarriage, and they lied there as well. Every woman who has a miscarriage will now be criminally investigated. And under a fascist right-wing Christo-nationalist regime, Christo-fascist, Christo-nationalist regime, the women will always be deemed liars. They will not be given the benefit of the doubt the way a man would be. They will be deemed guilty until proven innocent. But in many cases, there's no way to tell whether an abortion was self-induced, so the women will almost always be deemed guilty. In some cases where abortion is then deemed homicide, and for homicide you get the death penalty, imagine this. Okay. And now staff at hospitals are being given lists of symptoms and medical problems to look out for if a woman presents with them. And if a woman presents with any of these issues, the medical staff is required to report that patient as possibly having induced a miscarriage, aka abortion. A criminal investigation will then be done. Some of those symptoms and illnesses include infection, sepsis, cardiac arrest, pelvic inflammation, and numerous other conditions that are common and can be caused by a lot of other factors. Women are now viewed right from the start as potential quote-unquote baby killers, even if they were never pregnant. And of course, if they were pregnant and had to remove a zygote or risk dying with it still inside of them, they will also be considered baby killers, though the zygote would never have developed and it would have killed them if it was left in. Okay? When these sadistic, femicidal monsters use a term like that, quote-unquote baby killer, they are trying to evoke extreme emotion in anyone who hears them, right? And anyone who's listening to them. And they are giving a very false impression of what is actually happening. Okay, they are lying. And their lies are killing women because legal decisions are being made based on their goddamn lies. These are murderers. They use that term against women who have ectopic pregnancies, for Christ's sake. They are lying, and they are killing women and girls. They have created a legal justification to systemically kill women and little girls under the guise of righteousness. Okay, and since black women have a much higher maternal death rate, if they're forced to carry to term or to risk execution if they abort a zygote that is going to kill them if left in, it's black women. I mean, the U.S. already has an insanely high maternal death rate, but it's so high for black women. I mean, this is genocide, and it's intentional. This is a white supremacist genocidal agenda. Right. So when questioned as to how they would carry out these laws to make sure that a woman did not have a quote-unquote abortion, and you know what that means now, right? They said it would be done in a manner that would preserve the dignity of the women. They lied. Now, states like Texas have decided that women and girls should have no privacy and that their menstrual cycles can be tracked by the state. They even suggested a law that would forbid women and girls from leaving the state without first having a pregnancy test. This is meant to ensure that they can't leave the state to have an abortion, even in cases where they will die without one. And of course, if they do leave the state to have an abortion, Texans can, any average citizen can sue anyone who helps them for $10,000 each. Citizens monitoring other citizens. This is like Orwell's 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale together. This is the kind of dystopia they've created, right? All in one hellscape of a universe. In some states, if a woman is convicted, she will get a prison sentence. Other right-wing Christo-fascist states, politicians have said women should receive the death penalty if she, quote-unquote, kills her baby. Again, in this case, they are including ectopic pregnancies, non-viable pregnancies, and pregnancies that will kill the woman or girl if not removed. So she gets a death sentence either way. Other right-wing politicians have said that women should be institutionalized if she gets an abortion. Again, deeming women insane in situations where they are not. But targeted individuals, male and female, know how this works. The state uses any excuse they can find to deem you insane, thus discrediting you to everyone so no one will believe what you say. And of course, this also gives them a justification to institutionalize you. And for women who do become pregnant, right, they can be deemed insane, and this can be just another excuse for the abusive state to take their children away. Right. So Roe versus Wade was also based on a patient's right to privacy between her and her doctor. This privacy law became the basis of many other laws and amendments, freedoms and rights that were given based on a person's right to privacy. Every single one of these laws is at risk now, including all of the above mentioned. This is how they can get away with demanding that all women send their menstrual activity to the state. It's how they can get away with giving pregnancy tests at the border of red states. It's how they can justify tracking and monitoring all of a person's communications, online and off, to make sure they're not doing something that has been criminalized. First, abortion was criminalized, then transgender care was criminalized for anyone under 18. Then some states increased the age to 19, then to 21, then to 25, and used the same laws they created for abortion, disallowing people to leave the state to get gender-affirming care, right? And they also decided that they can put children in foster care, in foster homes, if their parents allow transgender care, and they can arrest the parents as well. So when they claim that this ruling that all this ruling does is let states make their own laws, they are lying, since they are trying to prevent people from leaving a state to access care in other states that has been criminalized in their own. And now, conservative politicians are also trying to to create nationwide abortion bans. And again, it will start with abortion and then be used against every other activity and person that is criminalized. And that is anything and anyone that gets in the way of the white Christian, Christo-fascist agenda, the white supremacist agenda. At this point, women were just used as the catalyst for that, because they knew that people would allow this. They would allow this to be done to women, and then once you allow it to be done to one group, then it can be done to all groups. At this point, anything can be criminalized and anyone can be deemed a criminal. All they have to do is say, this is against Christ, and now you're a criminal. This is all being done by the same Christo-fascist terrorists and their pastors who deemed homosexuals the enemy of God, and who called for the total removal of all of their rights and freedoms, and allowed for discrimination against them in all businesses, including hospitals, where they can be turned away for treatment, even in emergencies. If the hospital staff claims a religious opposition to treating them, people will die because of this. Okay, this is a way to kill people off without pulling the trigger. You take away the necessities of life, including healthcare, and people start to die, don't they? Some pastors have called for the execution of people in the LGBTQ+ community, these right-wing conservative pastors. Some psychotic false Christian lunatics claimed that pagans and witches should be killed. And in this case, a witch is anyone, and usually any woman who disagrees with anything a Christian says, pretty much, Where am I? Yeah, this is happening in the 21st century. You thought it would seem like we're in the Middle Ages, right? But you know what? When they say shit like this, believe that if they had the opportunity to do it, they would. We never know what activity will be added to the list of crimes and what other groups of people will be added to the list of criminals, deemed unworthy by God and thus unworthy of freedom in life. This is genocide of people who are already here and can think, feel, and suffer. They are using the law to kill us all off by taking away the necessities of life. And if that itself doesn't kill us, eventually by execution, because that is what their conservative pastors are threatening to do. This, all of it, will affect targeted individuals in even more horrific ways as our lives, male and female. We're already being targeted in these ways. We already have no privacy. We're already being hunted and terrorized and illegally surveilled. And, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we, the targeted individuals, male and female, lost whatever last bit of privacy we might have had, whatever last bit of bodily autonomy we might have had, and we didn't have much to begin with. If you thought things were bad before, just wait. So what has the Supreme Court taken from us? What else should I say? The Fifth Amendment, Miranda rights. Those of you from out of the country might have heard the term, you have the right to remain silent when someone is being arrested. Well, when people are arrested in the U.S., they are read these rights. They are read these rights, which explain to them that they can remain silent, that they have a right to an attorney, and so on. And, they don't have to incriminate themselves by saying anything right then. So what happened? Well, cops no longer have to read people their rights, since the new ruling by the Supreme Court states that people can no longer sue law enforcement if they are not informed of their rights. Right? If information they gave when they thought they had to was used against them in a court of law. Okay, again, all this means is that cops will not be held accountable if they fail to inform people of their rights, and therefore they no longer have to. Add to that the new border laws, courtesy of, you guessed it, the Supreme Court, which is no longer serving the United States of America. This is a fascist takeover. This is a white supremacist, Christo-nationalist, fascist takeover. America is gone. They decided that anyone who lives within 100 miles of the border has now lost their Fourth Amendment rights, which protected against random and arbitrary stops and unreasonable searches and seizures. So people can no longer sue federal officials or Border Patrol for violations of what we used to call our constitutional rights. Now, government agents can come into your home, tear shit up, harm you physically, and you can't sue them. They can also stop you when you're out if they want to, based solely on a suspicion. And now with citizens reporting citizens, there will be many suspicions. And I'm going to put that in quotes, quote unquote, suspicions. Whoever you are, if they've criminalized you. Try to get across the border now, In this law in particular, it's not meant to keep people out. It's meant to keep people in. Consider what else is happening. So women and girls will now be forced to breed for the state, as SCOTUS said, to replenish the quote-unquote domestic supply of infants. This, while housing prices are increasing to the point where people can't afford rent, laws are being made against cohabitation among people who are not related, making it harder for people to afford rent if they can't have roommates. And as the food shortages get worse, the prices of food increase. Life-saving healthcare is being taken away from the poor, but particularly from pregnant women. Women and girls are forced to bear their rapist offspring. Just recently we heard of a case where a girl was raped at 16. She had the baby. Her rapist sued for custody, got joint custody, so she would have to have him in her life for the rest of her goddamn life. But that wasn't enough for him. He then sued for full custody and got it. Then she was forced to pay him child support. But once it was discovered that he was also the child, a girl, a girl, said that he was possibly drugging her and raping her while she was sleeping, and only then did they remove her from his custody. And this case is still ongoing. This is what women and girls have to face now, right? Let me see. I'm trying to read this. Yeah. No, so this is what they have to face now, especially since their claims in court are always going to be denied. They're always going to be deemed liars, more so now than ever. This will get worse now that abusers will begin suing their victims for defamation, thanks to a certain other case that set the precedent for that. Abuse victims, including rape victims, will not be able to speak up. Because especially, first of all, they're going to be called liars. They're going to be, and now they can actually be sued for defamation. This means a whole lot of women and girls will be forced to have their abuser, or worse, their rapist, in their lives indefinitely. And if your first thought was to say, but women lie, then you're part of the problem. You just proved my fucking point. Fuck you. Right. So, and if the biological father is not... Let me see. So if the biological father is not in the picture, whether it was rape or whether it was consensual, but the woman or girl can't afford to care for the offspring, which in a situation like ours in the States, with poverty increasing, they can't afford that. They can't afford to take care of offspring. First of all, and don't say, well, the very people who are saying, well, just don't have sex, are also the people trying to ban birth control, even in marriage. So should they have a dry marriage then? What if pregnancy can risk the life of the mother? Should married couples just abstain from sex then? Even if pregnancy and birth can risk the woman's life, even if they can't afford another child? And these are the same men who then blame women for rape and murder because men aren't getting laid. On one hand, it's your fault because you won't have sex with them. On the other hand, if you get pregnant, they say it's your fault for having sex. You shouldn't have had sex, right? Anyway, so this forces, if women can't take care of their kids, if girls can't afford to take care of their kids, the state foster care system steps in, right? And this is run by evangelicals and Catholics, and they take over. All right, they take the babies who are almost always abused, including sexually, in the system. The Catholic Church is notorious for its child sex abuse of girls and of boys. I mean, it's a pedophile machine, okay? But now we found out about all of the sexual abuse of children that took place in the Southern Baptist Church. These are the people running the foster care system. These are the sadistic child groomers who are creating a system of such total desperation in the States and poverty that women and girls will have to give up their babies since they will be unable to care for them. And those babies will go right into the most abusive, sadistic system that has ever been created. The false church creates poverty, suffering, anguish, desperation, and then sets up a system which claims to help the people that it harmed with its other laws. The very system, This church created the desperate situation these people were in, and then gives them peanuts and says, but we're helping you. Be grateful to us. Look, we have more orphanages than any other group alive. Well, they create the need for more orphanages. Right? In many cases, the parent, let me see. Let me just start reading this again. I'm getting off track. The false church creates poverty, suffering, anguish, desperation, and then sets up a system which claims to help people in times of need, but it doesn't. The church created a need for orphanages and foster care systems by impoverishing people, crippling them financially, making it impossible for them to survive or care for the offspring they're forced to have, thus forcing them to give up their children. And in many cases, the fathers either aren't there, they ran off, or they were charged with rape and are in prison, or they die in the wars created by the false church. Okay, there's all of it orphans, children, right? In all of these cases, the church gets more kids to abuse. And now people are waking up to this. A lot more people are waking up to this. And people in desperate situations are going to be trying to get the hell out of the United States. In a lot of cases, with the children, and they're doing this, whether it's women or in little girls, or even, a lot of people will be doing this with the children they were forced to have, and they're now trying to protect. They have to get the hell away from this system in order to protect them from the system. And there, of course, will also be people trying to get out of the States because they need life-saving health care. All of them can be stopped at the border now and prevented from leaving. And if it's assumed that, a woman or a girl is going to leave to have an abortion, even if her pregnancy is ectopic and she'll die without one, even if she's an 11-year-old girl, well, how are they going to stop her from having one if they stop her at the border and assume that she's leaving to have an abortion? They're going to take her into custody. They will take a child rape victim and put her into custody and force her to bear that child, even if it kills her. They'll take a woman with an ectopic pregnancy and put her in custody, and she will die. Okay? Anyone who says that won't happen is a liar. All of this they hide behind closed doors, so you can't see the suffering, you can't hear it. That doesn't mean it's not happening. And now we add to the list of people who might have to flee, transgender men and women. At some point, they might have to flee. People from the LGBT plus community, pagans, and anyone deemed a witch, and so on. There will no doubt be more groups added to this list as the Christo-fascists make more and more laws criminalizing more and more human beings. So much for the party of freedom, right? Fucking liars. They accuse leftists of being anti-freedom when it is the right-wing fascists taking away even basic human rights and freedoms from anyone who isn't straight, white, male, and a conservative, false Christian. Now there is also an attack on people with end-stage kidney disease. So the Supreme Court just ruled that insurance companies don't need to cover their dialysis. And they'll die without that, right? So, God, fuck us. This is something that most people cannot afford to pay out of pocket. So if they don't have health insurance, or if their insurance won't cover it, they can't get the treatment, right? So in the States, out-of-pocket healthcare costs are so high, you need health insurance to cover it. But the conservatives want the Supreme Court to be allowed to deny life-saving coverage, or even to deny health insurance to certain people for certain issues. So we're just killing people off if they can't afford to pay out of pocket. Okay, this is genocide. They are killing off the poor, the sick, women, little girls, and they're, black women in particularly will have their lives threatened. It's black women in particular because they have a much higher maternal death rate, which is terrifying if you consider how high the maternal death rate already is in the United States. It's inexcusable. This should never happen with modern medicine. But this is happening in particularly Republican-run states for obvious reasons, okay? They would rather have a woman and even her baby. If she's 9 months pregnant and in labor, she's having a baby. That's a baby. That's a fully formed baby with a fully formed brain and central nervous system that can exist outside of her body. But it has to be born first. They would rather both die than provide any kind of life-saving medical care to the woman that might prematurely end her suffering. These sadistic animals take pleasure in the suffering and death of women. And these are sacrifices to their sadistic God, which is not Christ. They are liars when they claim it is. People are going to try and get out of the States, in many cases to save their lives and the lives of their friends and their family, and they are going to be stopped and detained at the border. June 24th, 2022 will forever be known as the day that America fell to fascism and the false Christian white supremacists officially took over. This will affect everyone, not just women and girls. People who are already being targeted in the surveillance program that is now being unleashed onto the masses must take extra care, as their targeting will get worse now. All right? Their targeting will get worse now that the privacy laws have been annihilated. But there is one group that I don't feel sorry for. Anyone who voted for this. If you call yourself Christian, remember that Jesus really only had one command that everything else was based on, the golden rule. If you don't want something done to you, don't do it to others. And for that, you have to be honest with yourself. How can your actions affect others? What might this do to people? Just because their suffering is hidden behind closed doors and you don't allow them to speak about it so you don't hear it and you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not happening. If you can't be honest with yourself, you can never follow the golden rule, because you're going to keep making decisions for people that hurt them and kill them while telling yourself that you've done nothing wrong. Taking away medical care from someone, knowing that they'll die without it, is murder. It's a way to kill them without pulling the trigger. And you know what? If people took away rights from you, and by taking away those rights, you died, you would call it murder. You say, well, God will protect pregnant women and keep them safe if they stop sinning. So you're using God as an excuse to justify slaughtering women and little girls, you liars. Well, how about we take your guns away? And if you stop sinning, God will protect you. And I'm pro gun rights. I mean, I'm totally pro. People should be able to defend themselves. I wouldn't actually vote to take away your gun rights. I'm just saying you are a bunch of goddamn hypocrites. You don't follow Jesus, you liars. You follow the Antichrist, and you blaspheme the name of Jesus every time you use him to do what you do to people. What you do to others, when you think it will only affect other people and you won't be harmed by it, will eventually come around to kick you in the ass, and you deserve it. Good riddance.